Welcome to ExpatGlobalLiving.com podcast with your host, Peter Scheinen.
We are continuing to part two, buying property in Uruguay, and I'm here with Juan. Now, our question is, how would foreigners go about purchasing property in Uruguay?
Purchasing property is a pretty straightforward process. There's no formalities in the negotiation stage, and there's just the legal formality of recording the title and properly structuring the reservation and the eventual deed when you do it. So basically, someone will come into Uruguay, they'll look for a property, they can go through a real estate broker or not, and then once they agree on a price, there's no formality on how to put an offer or anything. You just negotiate whichever way you want, on your own, through your broker, through your lawyer. And once you reach a price agreement, then what you will do is you'll need a conveyance attorney called escribano in Uruguay. It's a type of lawyer that by law has to intervene in signing off on the deed purchase and recording it. So you'll go to a conveyance attorney and say, well, I need to buy this property, help me structure it. So basically, conveyance attorney will draft what's called a reservation. A reservation is a document that's signed by three parties: buyer, seller, and the conveyance attorney, him or herself as the escrow agent. And according to that document, the buyer will put down 10% of the price, and the seller will commit to sell on a certain date on which the property is paid for and delivered. The important thing is that 10% is never handed over to the seller as a deposit. It stays in escrow with your own appointed conveyance attorney, which is guaranteed that the money is not in the seller's control, if you may call it that. Okay, so
now that's called in Uruguay. That's called a compromiso. See, yes.
That's called it's actually called a reserva. It's the more precise word and more commonly used words is reserva. It's a reservation.
Very good. Now, what should foreigners look out for when they're purchasing property in Uruguay?
Well, basically, Uruguay has a very solid registry system. Every property is recorded. There are no gray areas of properties with unclear rights or ownership rights. What you buy it in perpetuity, and it's recorded in your name until you decide otherwise. And basically, the important thing is get a good conveyance attorney. Basically, that's the main thing you need to consider. Every purchase does not clear the prior purchase. So every time someone buys something, they still need to have a conveyance attorney to do the title search and do the due diligence on the chain of ownership of the last 30 years, which is basically the task of the conveyance attorney. So I would say that's the main thing. In terms of, construction here is done in the old style, mostly of double brick wall. So unless you're looking for very old construction, very old buildings in the Ciudad Vieja, in the old city of Montevideo, for example, you're usually not going to find structural problems in properties. So I would say the other recommendation would be that if you're looking at very old properties, that you make sure you have an engineer or an architect check out the structure. But otherwise, in most things, you don't find any type of issues like that.
Now, there is a law that I've been hearing about, and whether you could verify, starting next year, mid next year, a $5,000 U.S. cap limit on purchases. So you could do a transfer, but no cash after June 1st next year.
Yeah. What this is? There was a law that was passed this year. It was negotiated between the banks and the government to increase the use of the banking system, and to take cash out of circulation of most operations. And what it says is that for real estate purchases and purchase of items above $5,000, you need to do it through a bank transaction, meaning through a check or a wire transfer, which in real estate, the reality is that's how it occurs anyhow. No one buys in cash like you would hear about 10, 20 years ago, someone with $200,000, $300,000 in cash, because the reality is if the seller who receives those $200,000 in cash goes to his bank to deposit, the bank's going to say, a bank in Uruguay or anywhere in the world is usually going to say, well, this is strange, a bag of, all this cash,
Sure.
Justify this and that, so it's not easy to deposit it anyhow. I would say that 99% of transactions at our firm and throughout the market, in the last 10 years, last 5 years, occur through banks. The way it usually works is the buyer finds a property. Let's take a foreign buyer. The foreign buyer buys a property. He'll either have his own bank account in Uruguay where he wires the money to, or he wires it to the escribano, the conveyance attorney's account, for him or her to pay at closing. And whether it's the buyer at his own account or his or her conveyance attorney in their account, for the closing we go to the bank, ask for a bank draft, which is a certified check, and with that the payment is done at closing. So what this does in terms of real estate is just formalizes what's already been done in most transactions anyhow.
How would you best describe the safety of investing in property in Uruguay?
Well, that's one of the main reasons why the real estate market in Uruguay has done so well in the last decade. Uruguay is seen as a safe haven. I always tell people, Uruguay's not a place for adventures because you won't find them here. You're not going to triple your money from one year to the next, but you're also not going to see it significantly lose value. It's a very stable, standard real estate market. It's solid. There's very little mortgage lending. Only about 3.5% of operations have financing in them. So it's Uruguay is a safe haven in a way. I like to tell the story of 2008 when the crisis hit and most markets plunged. There were some people speculating here who said, "Oh, I'll sell the property now. Everything's going to go down." And actually, properties never went down here. Uruguay and Peru actually were the only two countries in Latin America, or in the whole Americas actually, which had positive growth in 2008. When the whole world economy imploded. So it's a very solid option. And whether it's residential real estate and farmland, which has a very attractive angle because of world demand for food growth and population growth, it's a very attractive product for someone wanting to diversify part of their portfolio into a real estate asset in a stable, safe place.
And one last question: how would you say that the credit that's being more readily available in Uruguay, will that at all in the foreseeable future, will you see an effect in the properties, being that a lot of the properties have been bought in cash previously, and now credit is more readily available? Is that going to affect it in any way?
Credit is more readily available, but not anywhere near on a large scale. Like I said, only about 3.5% of operations get done with credit. If anything, that could go up to about 6, 7, or 8. With the expansion of credit that you were talking about. But the other thing also is, banks don't lend as generously as you would be accustomed to seeing in the U.S. or Europe, which brought about the mortgage crisis. The banks will lend at most about 70% of the value of the property at most. The terms, the extension of the term is usually much shorter, 10, 15, maybe 20 years. And the rates are more expensive. So, it's not something that is easily going to become widespread.
Well, thank you, Juan, for your time. I appreciate it. And, if someone would like to reach you, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, thank you, Peter. My pleasure. And obviously, any information you'd like on this or any other Uruguay investment or living in Uruguay related issues, we have a very friendly webpage, www.fs.com.uy. F is in Frank, S is in Sam. Or you can write us at info@fs.com.uy, and we'll send you an information package. The website has on the right-hand side 5 very user-friendly and comprehensive presentations for you to download. And obviously, we have other PDFs that if you write us, we'll happily send you. And obviously, after that, any follow-up talk or meeting will be welcome.
Thank you very much, Juan.
Thank you. Goodbye.